Hello, everyone. I wanted to talk about what you can do to get ready for the first exam. We'll talk about course objectives, the logistics of the exam, the focus of each module, and what you should do to be getting ready for this. First of all, the course objectives are listed here. These are in your syllabus. I'm not going to read through them right now. I have two slides of this, but just so you can see what things we mentioned in the syllabus are going to be covered on this exam. We'll go through each module in detail and talk about how those modules link back to these course objectives within each module, because that's how you learned it, and I think that's the easiest way. But if this is helpful to you, please pause, take the time to read through each of these. The way the exam will work is it will become available at the regular start of class time and remain available throughout the period in which we have class. So it becomes available at 9 a.m. and then it's available until basically 11:59. You will be working independently on the exam during that time. I will have Zoom open the whole time, checking for questions. So you can come to Zoom, you can come to class basically if you have a question about either submitting the exam or perhaps a question on the content as well. But it's mainly for issues related to technology that could happen during the exam. The exam has a 90-minute time limit. So that's from the time you open the exam until the time you complete it and submit it. That includes a 15-minute buffer for technology issues. So for example, when you upload your documents to Canvas for the exam, that's allowing that much time to do that. This is an exam that if we were taking this in person would be a 75-minute exam. So just be aware of that extra cushion is there for technology issues. And we'll talk about how to deal with those as we go through this. So how this exam will work, you will be basically downloading a document, completing it on your own, and then uploading it to Canvas when you're done. You'll be uploading it as either a PDF or a JPEG. So those are the two formats that I would be able to read as you do that. I'm going to talk about a few ways you can do this. There's a lot of options. I don't want to limit your options here. As long as I'm able to get the document, I will grade it. So if you want to print it out, fill it in, scan it, take a picture, and then submit that, that is fine. If you can't print it out and would like to write on a separate page, that is fine as well. I would recommend against typing everything in because I want to see you showing your work. So if you do type everything in, that's fine. But also submit your whatever paper you're doing your your scratch work on, so I can see how you got to that answer. And so you can get some credit for that if you're a little bit off. When you submit this, I have had students in the past say they have to be able to submit it as a single document or else it won't accept that submission. So you need to be able to figure out how to do that. We'll talk in a bit how to help you figure that out. Make sure that what you submit is, you've completed it and it's legible so that I can grade it correctly. And then to get full credit, you do need to show your work. So if all I see is the answer, but I don't see how you got the answer, then you might not get any credit for that question. So it depends on the question, what that will look like. But in general, you need to show your work to get full credit, particularly if it's a question where you have to do any math at all, other than, say, counting electrons. So if you're doing any kind of multiplication anywhere to get there, you do need to show that work to get the credit. A bit later, we'll talk about some of the technology things related to how you can make sure you know how to do this before the day of the exam. But this is what I will share with you for now in terms of what the expectations of the exam are. So you will need to plan to take it when we normally have our class time. It will not take that full amount of time, but I will be available that full amount of time in case there are questions. And what I will say is make sure to reach out to me with your questions during that time. If you are having technology issues, maybe dealing with Canvas, send me an email, jump on the Zoom. Somehow you need to let me know so I know that you are interested in taking the exam and we can figure something out if we need to. Some other things related to the logistics of the exam are what you should have in front of you while taking the exam. If this were an in-person exam, I would give you a bunch of documents along with the exam that you would be using to take it. I'm not doing that this time because you can find that information yourself and supply that to yourself while taking the exam. Definitely have the periodic table. You will not be able to answer these questions without that, so make sure you have that available to you. Various equations and constants are in the textbook as well, so you'll have to decide. Maybe you have some of those memorized. That's fine. If not, you have to know where to find that information within your textbook. This is an open book exam, and you need to know how to do that, right? You need to know where to find that information in your textbook. Open book does not mean you learn it as you go. It should be very clear what the expectations are in terms of what you need to be able to do on the exam ahead of time. Make sure you know where to find whatever you need to look up. Don't plan on learning it. You're not going to have time to learn it during the exam. You need to know it before the exam. And if you do need to look something up, that will be an option for you. Definitely have a calculator available. If it's your cell phone, that's fine for this exam. But you need to be able to do those calculations really quickly. Don't plan to do them by hand. There's not enough time for that. But things you should not have access to are other people and any kind of an internet source. To be clear about that, I'm including in the exam, actually the very first page of the exam is an honesty pledge that you are indicating that you haven't done those things, right? So I'm letting you use your books. I'm letting you have whatever notes you need, but that is your information, right? Your material. That is not looking up answers on the internet. That is not talking to a tutor, someone you paid, someone you found on Reddit, your lab partners. That doesn't count. It has to be your work. If there is evidence that it is not your work, then you'll get a 0 on it and be referred to the dean. So you're given a lot of leeway here in terms of your resources you can have available, but it has to be what you've done, right? It can't be what someone else has done for you. There are a few things that I have in place to kind of make sure that this is happening for you. One is that there's a watermark on the exam, and I can search online to see if that's been shared and then figure out, is that coming from my class? If so, then who is asking those questions online? And then another thing that a couple of things, there's more than one version of the exam. So if you're sharing with each other, you could be giving each other the wrong answers. And then the third thing, Google is not going to give you the right answers for every question. And in fact, there are some questions on this exam that were chosen in part because Google is giving you the wrong answer for them. And if I see that answer, then that is subject to getting a 0 on the exam. If you follow what we have done in the course, that shouldn't be an issue. But if you just type the question into Google, write down what you see without thinking about it, then you're in a position to potentially get a 0 on this. So what you need to do is just plan to do the work yourself, have all your resources available in front of you when it's time to start, and hope for the best. And I think if you're ready, if you've mastered this material, which you can kind of get a sense for based on what you've done on the quizzes, what you've done on the practice exam, that you should do well on it. So don't compromise that by trying to cheat to get ahead, because that will ultimately not benefit you at all. Okay, so let's talk about what's on the exam. So here I'm telling you the breakdown in terms of about what percentage you should expect for each module to show up. You'll see Module 6 there is the biggest. Probably shouldn't be a surprise, as that is the one that we spent 2 weeks on, whereas we spent 1 week on the other ones. Some of those modules we covered new material in the lab. So in those cases, you might see a bit more on those modules than you do on some of the other ones. Okay, so for Module 2, these are some of the important ideas here. So be able to use scientific notation, be able to use significant figures. So that's both counting significant figures for a measurement as well as performing calculations with the correct number of significant figures. For unit conversions, recognize what units are, convert between different SI measurements correctly. So between whatever prefixes you have, you need to know those and be able to convert correctly for those. Also, we did look at cases where units were raised to a power, so that could come up as well. In Module 3, we had density and density calculations could be important there. We looked at the scientific method, classifying matter, properties, transformations, and energy, and then temperature conversions. So this was the material from Module 3. Maybe the lightest of the modules we saw here, but some important ideas as well. A lot of stuff in Module 4. So subatomic particles, protons, electrons, and neutrons. And then we use terms like mass number, atomic number, and atomic mass to describe things related to these particles. Also be aware of the periodic table. So be able to find information from the table about a given element, know what metals and nonmetals are, their properties and where they are in the periodic table, and then some special groups from the periodic table as well. And then we looked at compounds and molecules. So be able to classify a compound as either a molecule, an ionic compound, or an acid, and then be able to both name compounds from the formula as well as write the formula from the name. So be able to go in either direction on that. And again, we had the lab where we went through that. So that would be something to be familiar with. Module 5 was very heavy on some math. So we had some new conversions here between atoms and moles, between moles and grams. And so part of that was then using the periodic table correctly. We had empirical formula and percent composition. And for all of these, you want to be able to go in both directions, right? So I say atoms and moles. Well, you should also be able to do moles to atoms. So know how to use conversion factors to go in either direction. And that is a little bit trickier with empirical formula, going between empirical formula and percent composition. And then finally, we talked about molecular formula. So lots of math here, lots of conversions, calculations. Make sure you're comfortable with this. Again, this material is built upon even greater as we get into Module 6. Okay, so again, Module 6 is the big one. So a lot of things here. We had balancing equations, classifying equations. So we're looking here at chemical reactions. And then predicting reactions. Now, the predictions here are specifically just the result of a double replacement reaction in terms of balancing those ionic compounds in a new configuration. We'll get into more of the details that we saw in Chapter 7 in a later module, but for now, you want to make sure you know how to do that kind of prediction. And then the biggest chunk of this module was stoichiometry. So we spent quite a bit of time on this, and this is linking the kind of early material in Module 6 related to balancing equations with the information from Module 5 related to moles and mass. So you need to be able to do a mole-to-mole conversion based on a balanced equation. You need to be able to convert from mass of one substance to mass of any other substance in that balanced equation. So know how to figure out what are those conversion factors to get from one to the other. There are numerous possibilities here. You could go moles to mass, mass to moles, lots of possibilities. The key here is understanding conversion factors, how to set them up to get to what you're looking for. And then additional applications of that. So stoichiometry, you need to understand stoichiometry before you can do any of these next three things. So the limiting reagent concept, so understand how to use that. The percent yield concept, understand how to use that. And then finally, we looked at enthalpy. So when there's heat involved in a reaction, using that as a conversion factor. So a lot of big ideas here in Module 6. Make sure you understand them. This is often the most challenging material for the first exam. So hopefully this extra week of review is sufficient to help get you through that, to do well on the exam. Okay, so I want to talk about what you can do to get ready for this. The main thing is make sure you know how to do all of this. Make sure you've completed all those worksheets. Again, I'm not collecting those, but hopefully you see how the quizzes were you could predict the quizzes from those worksheets in many cases. You have a sense of what those questions will be about. So make sure if there's anything from any of those worksheets you don't understand, that you have it figured out before this exam. Whatever resources you want to use, have them at hand, have them easily accessible, bookmarked, or however you want to organize them. You can print out all the worksheets and have them all filled out. That would be a great way to set up your resources. Or you can bookmark parts of the textbook. However you want to do that, make sure it's easy to find what you want as you take the exam. And then take the practice exam. I would recommend taking it as if it were an exam. So set aside about 75 minutes to do that. And a few things with the practice exam. I should mention, I believe it says this on Canvas as well. Your exam will not focus on multiple choice questions in the way the practice exam does. So it will be more about doing kind of showing your work type of questions. So just be aware of that, that you won't see that on the practice exams. And then when you're done with it, go ahead and upload it. Now, I'm not going to grade these. But the reason I'm having you do that is it's the same process you're going to be using for uploading the real exam. In fact, on Canvas, it's showing up as a real grade. And the reason I've done that, I'm not going to grade it, so don't worry about that grade. But the reason I've done that is so that Canvas is going to treat what you do the same way. So when you upload the practice exam, it will, whatever you're doing should work there. If it works there, it should work on the real exam. If you want to just, take pictures and upload those pictures, that's fine. But just get a sense for, okay, if I take this exam, I'm going to write on all these pages, and then I'm going to upload them. Or I'm going to write on this separate sheet of paper, and I'm going to upload that. You want to make sure you know how that works. So you'll have multiple pages that will be submitted essentially as one document. So make sure part of this practice exam is about figuring out how to do that that works for you and the devices you have available. Um, if you are having difficulty with that, please reach out to me and we'll figure out a plan. Um, there's a lot of things in here that you can be working on, and there's a lot of resources available to help you get there. So make sure you are getting the resources you need. There is a discussion board specifically for preparing for this exam. This discussion board, as long as you are putting something there, you'll get the full credit, right? So just make sure you're doing something, but you can still get extra credit for responding to other people. So any questions you have, whether it's about the uploading process or it's about specific material, put them on that discussion board. In fact, one thing I sometimes do is if people have a specific question about maybe one of the worksheets or maybe something on the practice exam, if there's enough interest in that, I can sometimes share the answer key for that. So the practice exam discussion board is a great place to ask about that kind of thing. I should say exam number 1 discussion board. I will also have regular office hours throughout the week. So please feel free to reach out to me during that time as well. We do have tutors, so you can participate in ETC or other tutoring options as a way to prepare. So lots of things available to help you do well. I hope you all do excellent, and I will be there through the whole exam on Zoom if anything comes up at the last minute. Good luck, everyone, and I will see you in class.